White woman attempted to take black girl's seat. Minutes later, her black 𝐒𝐿 dad shut down the flight. You need to move right now. The white woman's voice cut through the first-class cabin of Delta Flight 892 like a knife, her designer handbag already being tossed onto the armrest of seat 1A, where 11-year-old Aria Thompson sat. This is my seat. You're in the wrong place, sweetie. The economy is in the back. Aria looked up from her phone, her excitement about joining her older siblings for a week-long Orlando vacation evaporating instantly. She'd been texting her sister Maya about the theme parks they'd visit, the late-night movie marathons they'd planned, the freedom of a whole week without parental supervision. Now this white woman in a Chanel suit stood over her like she owned the entire airplane. Ma'am, this is my seat, Aria said quietly, holding up her boarding pass with hands that had started to shake. My dad bought this ticket for me. The woman, mid-40s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, jewelry that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, didn't even look at the boarding pass. That's impossible. First-class seats cost thousands of dollars. There's obviously been some mistake with your ticket. Now move before I call a flight attendant to sort this out. But I have my boarding pass right here, Aria insisted, her 11-year-old voice getting smaller as other passengers turned to stare. It was scanned at the gate. They let me board. This is my seat. Don't argue with me, young lady, the woman snapped, her face flushing red. I paid good money for this seat, and I'm not spending 5 hours next to some unaccompanied minor who probably doesn't even belong in this section. Now get your things and move to where you're supposed to be. Aria felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people who were watching like she was some kind of spectacle. She'd been so excited about this trip, about flying first class for the first time, about feeling grown up and independent. Her dad had specifically upgraded her seats so she'd be comfortable, so the flight attendants would keep an extra eye on her since she was traveling alone. Now this woman was treating her like she'd stolen something, like she was a problem that needed removing, like her very presence in seat 1A was somehow criminal. Ma'am, I promise this is my seat, Aria tried one more time, her voice cracking. Can we please just check with the flight attendant? They can verify. I don't need to verify anything, the woman interrupted, reaching for Aria's carry-on in the overhead bin. I can see what's happening here. You either got a ticket you weren't supposed to have, or you're sitting in the wrong seat, hoping no one would notice. Either way, you need to leave. Now. What this entitled white woman didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know as she stood there radiating privilege and certainty, was that the 11-year-old black girl she was trying to displace had a father who was about to make her regret every word. Because Aria's father, Marcus Thompson, wasn't just any worried parent. He was the CEO of Delta Airlines. And in exactly 2 minutes, his executive assistant was going to inform him that his daughter was being harassed on one of his own flights. And when Marcus Thompson found out, Flight 892 wasn't going anywhere. Now let me ask you something that'll shake you to your core. Have you ever watched someone assume a black person doesn't belong somewhere expensive, somewhere nice, somewhere that privilege has historically been reserved for white people? Ever seen a child treated like a criminal just for occupying a space their family paid for? If you think this kind of seat-stealing, space-policing behavior is justified, if you believe children should just quietly accept being displaced by entitled adults, then this story isn't for you. But if you know in your soul that what's happening to Aria is textbook racism disguised as correcting a mistake, then you need to watch until the very end. Drop your experiences in the comments. When have you seen black people questioned about whether they really belong in first class, in luxury spaces, in places that should be accessible to anyone who can afford them? Hit that like button if you recognize this pattern. Share this video because people need to see how racism operates in 2024, and subscribe to Hyper Racism channel because what happens in the next 2 minutes will prove that sometimes the person you're trying to displace has power you never imagined. This entitled woman has no idea whose daughter she just targeted. And justice is coming faster than this plane can taxi. Aria Thompson had been counting down to this trip for 3 months. Ever since her older siblings, Maya and Jordan, had invited her to join them for their annual spring break vacation in Orlando, she'd been marking off days on her calendar with a bright purple marker. Maya was 19, home from Howard University for the week. Jordan was 17, taking a gap year before college. And Aria, at 11, was finally old enough to join them without their parents tagging along. "You're growing up so fast," her mother, Dr. Simone Thompson, had said that morning while braiding Aria's hair into neat cornrows adorned with purple beads that matched her favorite hoodie. "My baby girl, flying first class all by herself to meet her siblings. When did you get so big?" Aria had rolled her eyes in that way only 11-year-olds can. "Mom, I'm not a baby. I'm almost 12. And it's just one flight. Maya and Jordan will be waiting at the airport." Her father, Marcus Thompson, had driven her to Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport himself, even though he had back-to-back meetings at Delta Airlines headquarters all day. As CEO, his schedule was relentless, but he'd learned after 23 years of marriage and 3 kids that some moments required showing up personally. "You have your phone charged?" Marcus had asked for the 3rd time as they pulled up to departures. "Yes, Dad." "And you'll text me when you board?" "Yes, Dad." "And call me the second you land?" "Dad." Aria had laughed, hugging him tight. "I'll be fine. It's a 2-hour flight. What could go wrong?" Marcus had held his youngest daughter a moment longer than necessary, remembering when she was small enough to fit in one arm, when her biggest worry was whether her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks, would survive the washing machine. Now she was flying alone, wearing the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her, carrying a designer backpack she'd saved her allowance money to buy, looking so grown up it made his chest ache. "I upgraded you to first class," Marcus had told her. 1A, window seat. "The flight attendants know you're traveling alone, and they'll keep an eye on you. If you need anything at all, you ask them. And if anyone gives you trouble, you call me immediately. Understand?" Aria had nodded, not really processing why her dad's tone had gotten so serious. She'd flown plenty of times with her family, always in first class because of her dad's position at Delta. She knew the routine, knew how to navigate airports, knew that flying was safe and easy and nothing to worry about. She'd had no idea that being a black child flying first class alone would make her a target. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 757 was a world of leather and luxury. Wide seats that reclined into beds, ambient lighting that shifted from warm gold to cool blue, enough legroom that even tall adults could stretch out. It smelled like expensive perfume and fresh coffee, with that underlying scent of recycled air that all planes had. Aria had boarded early, taking advantage of the priority boarding her first-class ticket provided. She'd stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her, buckled in, pulled out her phone to text her dad and Maya, and felt proud and independent and excited about the adventure ahead. She'd been completely unprepared for the white woman who'd appeared 10 minutes later, already acting like Aria was an intruder in her space. The woman's name was Catherine Whitmore, though Aria didn't know that yet. Catherine was a real estate executive from Connecticut, flying to Orlando for a luxury property conference. She'd been flying first class for 20 years, had very specific ideas about who belonged in premium cabins, and had cultivated an ability to spot what she called upgrades who don't understand first-class etiquette. When Catherine had seen Aria in seat 1A, her immediate assumption hadn't been that this well-dressed black child had a legitimate first-class ticket. She had assumed that there'd been some mistake, some computer glitch, some reason this girl had ended up where she clearly didn't belong. Catherine had built a career on reading people, on assessing value and worth at a glance. And her prejudice-tinted assessment told her that black children flying alone didn't fit the first-class demographic. They were economy passengers, maybe premium economy if their parents had splurged. But 1A? The most expensive seat in the cabin? Impossible. She'd never considered that the confident, polite, well-spoken girl in that seat might be the daughter of someone more powerful than she was. That her snap judgment about who deserved luxury was about to collide with consequences she couldn't imagine. Around them, other first-class passengers had started to notice the confrontation. A businessman in 2C looked up from his laptop, frowning. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband. A flight attendant at the front of the cabin, preparing pre-departure beverages, glanced over with concern. But nobody intervened. Not yet. Because in that moment, Catherine Whitmore represented authority, a paying first-class passenger with legitimate concerns about a seating error. And Aria represented uncertainty, a child alone, possibly in the wrong seat, possibly causing a problem that needed correcting. The assumption of who deserved belief, who deserved the benefit of the doubt, who deserved the seat they were sitting in, all of it fell along racial lines so predictable it was almost scripted. "I'm calling a flight attendant right now," Catherine announced loudly, pressing her call button repeatedly. "This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to argue with a child about my assigned seat." "But it's not your assigned seat," Aria said, her voice barely above a whisper now. "It's mine. I can show you my boarding pass. I can show you my ID. Please, ma'am. I'm not lying." "Flight attendant," Catherine called, ignoring Aria completely. "I need assistance immediately. There's a seating issue that needs to be resolved." A flight attendant named Jennifer approached, her professional smile already in place, completely unaware that she was about to step into a situation that would end up on every news channel in America. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Jennifer asked Catherine, her deference to the adult passenger automatic and unthinking. "This child is in my seat," Catherine said firmly. I have my boarding pass right here, and I need her moved immediately so I can sit down." Jennifer turned to Aria, and in that turn, in the slight shift of her body language that suggested she was already preparing to ask Aria to move rather than verify the facts first, the power dynamic was set. "Sweetie, can I see your boarding pass?" Jennifer asked Aria, her tone kind but already assuming the child was the problem. Aria handed over her boarding pass with shaking hands, watching as Jennifer scanned it with her device. The scanner beeped. Green light. Valid ticket. Seat 1A. Assigned to Aria Thompson. Jennifer's expression flickered with confusion. She scanned it again. Same result. "I don't understand," Jennifer murmured, then turned to Catherine. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass?" Catherine handed it over with absolute confidence, certain that the scanner would prove her right and this child wrong. Jennifer scanned it. The screen showed seat 3C. Not 1A. Seat 3C. Catherine Whitmore had been trying to steal a seat that was never hers. And now, as that realization began to dawn on Jennifer's face, as other passengers leaned in to see what was happening, Catherine's entire justified indignation was about to crumble. But the damage to Aria had already been done. And someone very powerful was about to make sure everyone involved understood exactly how severe that damage was. Jennifer stared at Catherine's boarding pass, then at Aria's, confusion and embarrassment warring on her face. "Ma'am, your seat is 3C. This young lady is correctly seated in 1A. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's face cycled from confident to confused to red with humiliation in seconds. Around them, passengers who'd been watching the confrontation began murmuring, some pulling out phones to record what happened next. "That's impossible," Catherine said, her voice rising. "I specifically paid for a window seat in the first row. There must be an error in your system. I want this corrected immediately." "Ma'am, there's no error," Jennifer said carefully, her professional training kicking in. "Your seat is 3C, which is an aisle seat. If you'd like to request a seat change, I can check availability after all passengers have boarded, but right now, this young lady is in her correctly assigned seat." Catherine's humiliation was transforming into rage, that particular fury of someone who's been caught wrong but refuses to admit it. "This is unacceptable. I paid over $3,000 for this ticket. I'm not sitting in 3C while some child gets the premium seat." "I paid for my seat too," Aria said quietly, finding courage she didn't know she had. "My dad bought this ticket for me. I didn't do anything wrong. Don't talk back to me." Catherine snapped, her voice sharp enough to make Aria flinch. "This is exactly the problem. Children like you are given things they haven't earned, taking spots from people who actually deserve them." The racist subtext was impossible to miss. Several passengers gasped. A black man in row 2 stood up, his expression angry. "Lady, that's out of line. She's a child with a valid ticket. You need to back off." "I don't need a lecture from you." Catherine spun toward him, her carefully maintained veneer of civility cracking completely. This whole situation is ridiculous. Since when do unaccompanied minors get first-row seats while paying adults are shoved to the back? 3C is hardly the back, Jennifer said, her patience clearly wearing thin. Ma'am, I need you to take your assigned seat so we can complete boarding. I will not. Catherine's voice reached a pitch that made passengers in economy class crane their necks. I want to speak to the captain. I want to speak to a supervisor. I want someone with actual authority to fix this disaster. Aria felt tears streaming down her face now, unable to hold them back any longer. She'd been so excited about this trip, so proud to be traveling alone like a grown-up, so happy to be joining her siblings. Now she was the center of a scene that felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Sweetie, you haven't done anything wrong, Jennifer said to Aria, her voice gentle. Then she turned to Catherine, all gentleness gone. Ma'am, you're creating a disturbance. If you don't take your assigned seat immediately, I'll have no choice but to call security and have you removed from this aircraft. Remove me? Catherine laughed, shrill and disbelieving. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I've been flying Delta for 15 years. You're threatening to remove me because I questioned why a child has a better seat than paying adults. You didn't question, the black man from row 2 interjected. You accused her of not belonging here. You tried to take her seat. And you've been borderline racist this entire time. That flight attendant is showing you way more patience than you deserve. Catherine whirled on him. How dare you call me racist? I have black friends. This has nothing to do with race. This is about proper seat assignments and airline incompetence. But everyone in first class could see through the lie. They'd heard the emphasis Catherine put on children like you. They'd seen her immediate assumption that Aria didn't belong. They'd watched her try to displace a child based on nothing but her own sense of entitlement and prejudice. I'm calling my lawyer, Catherine announced, pulling out her phone. This is discrimination against premium passengers. This is... Aria's phone buzzed in her lap. A text from her dad. Baby girl, did you board okay? Text me when you're settled. Her hands shook as she typed back. Dad, there's a problem. A woman is trying to take my seat. The flight attendant says I'm right, but she won't leave me alone. I'm scared. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, before she could worry about bothering her dad during his important meetings, before she could convince herself she should just handle this alone like a grown-up. 30 seconds later, her phone rang. Dad calling. Hi, Daddy, Aria answered, her voice breaking on the words. Baby, tell me exactly what's happening, Marcus Thompson said, and the controlled fury in his voice made Aria feel safer even from 2,000 miles away. Every detail. As Aria explained through tears, as Catherine continued arguing with Jennifer about speaking to supervisors, as passengers recorded and whispered and took sides, nobody noticed the flight attendant at the front of the cabin receiving an urgent call on the crew phone. Nobody noticed her face go pale as she listened. Nobody noticed her approach the cockpit and knock urgently, speaking rapidly to the captain. And nobody except Aria heard her father say, Don't move from that seat, baby girl. Daddy's handling this. And that woman is about to learn she picked the wrong child to target. Because Marcus Thompson had just pulled up the live cabin camera feed on his executive dashboard, had watched the entire confrontation in real time, had seen Catherine Whitmore try to displace his daughter and then double down when proven wrong. And he'd made a decision that would ground Flight 892 and end Catherine Whitmore's day in the most devastating way possible. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated while we address the situation. We apologize for the inconvenience. Catherine smiled triumphantly. See? They're finally fixing this mess. You'll be moved shortly, she told Aria with false sweetness. But she had no idea that the situation being addressed was her. And the fix wasn't going to be what she expected. Have you ever watched someone refuse to admit they're wrong, doubling down on cruelty because accepting fault feels like losing? Catherine Whitmore could have apologized, taken her actual seat, and flown to Orlando with nothing more than mild embarrassment. Instead, she chose escalation. She chose to terrorize a child rather than accept she'd made a mistake. And now that choice was about to cost her everything. The aircraft door opened, and Captain Rodriguez appeared in first class, his expression grave. Behind him came the gate supervisor and 2 airport security officers. The cabin went silent, all eyes on the uniformed figures making their way down the aisle. Catherine straightened in the aisle where she'd been blocking traffic, a satisfied smile crossing her face. Finally, someone who can fix this ridiculous situation and get this child out of my seat. Captain Rodriguez's eyes swept the cabin, landing on Aria's tear-stained face, then on Catherine standing over her like a predator. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, are you Catherine Whitmore, passenger in seat 3C? "I am," Catherine said confidently. "And I need you to understand that there's been a terrible seating error. This child is in my seat, and your flight attendant has been completely unhelpful in resolving the situation." "Ms. Whitmore," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice carefully controlled, "I've just received a call from Delta 𝐒𝐿. He's been watching this entire confrontation on our cabin camera system." Catherine waved her hand dismissively. "Good. Then he saw how poorly your staff handled this. I'll be expecting compensation for this experience, and I want assurances that—" "The CEO," Captain Rodriguez interrupted, his voice harder now, "is 𝐒𝐿 Thompson. And the 11-year-old girl you've been terrorizing for the last 20 minutes is his daughter." The color drained from Catherine's face so fast it was almost comical. Around them, passengers gasped. Some started frantically Googling 𝐒𝐿 Thompson Delta 𝐒𝐿 on their phones, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock as they confirmed the captain's words. That's not possible," Catherine stammered. "She's just a child. She's traveling alone. There's no way." "My daddy is 𝐒𝐿 Thompson," Aria said, her voice small but steady, emboldened by her father still on the phone, by the captain's presence, by the sudden shift in power she could feel crackling through the cabin. "I told you I had a ticket. I told you this was my seat. But you didn't believe me because you thought I didn't belong here." Catherine's mouth opened and closed, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know who her father was? If she'd just said, 'So you only treat black children with respect if you know their parents are powerful?'" The black man from row 2 spoke up, his voice cutting. "That's your defense?" Jennifer, the flight attendant, pulled up something on her tablet and showed it to the captain. He nodded grimly, then turned back to Catherine. "Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Thompson has requested that you be removed from this aircraft. Your ticket is being refunded, and you're being placed on Delta's no-fly list pending a full investigation into your behavior." "You can't do that." Catherine's voice rose to a shriek. "I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I've been flying Delta for 15 years. One mistake and you're banning me? This is outrageous." "One mistake?" Captain Rodriguez's eyebrow raised. "You attempted to displace a child from her correctly assigned seat. When proven wrong, you refused to take your own seat. You created a disturbance that delayed boarding. You made discriminatory comments that multiple witnesses have confirmed. And you traumatized an 11-year-old girl who did nothing except try to travel to see her siblings." Security moved forward, but Catherine backed away, her panic transforming into desperate anger. "This is discrimination against me. You're only doing this because her father is the 𝐒𝐿. If she were just some random black kid, you wouldn't care." "You're right about one thing," Captain Rodriguez said quietly. "Most black children who experience what Aria experienced today don't have a CEO father who can ground a plane and demand accountability. They file complaints that go nowhere. They accept humiliation because fighting back seems futile. And that's exactly why Mr. Thompson is making an example of this situation. Because every passenger, especially every child, deserves the dignity you denied his daughter." Aria held her phone tighter, her father's voice steady in her ear. "You see, baby? You were right. You did nothing wrong. And Daddy made sure everyone knew it." Catherine looked around the cabin desperately, searching for sympathy, for support, for anyone who would validate her version of events. But she found only hostile faces and recording phones, passengers who'd witnessed her cruelty and were glad to see consequences finally arrive. "Please," Catherine's voice cracked, the reality of her situation finally penetrating. "I'll apologize. I'll take my seat. Please don't ban me. I need to get to Orlando. I have a conference. I have. You should have thought about that before you decided to terrorize a child, Captain Rodriguez said flatly. He nodded to security. Please escort Ms. Whitmore from the aircraft. As security took Catherine's arms, she turned back one final time, looking at Aria with an expression that mixed humiliation and rage. This isn't fair. You're ruining my life over a seating confusion. It wasn't confusion, Aria said, her voice stronger now, growing into the power her father had modeled for her. You saw a black girl in first class and decided I didn't belong there. You tried to take what was mine because you thought you deserved it more. And now you're facing consequences for that choice. Catherine was led down the aisle and off the aircraft, her protests echoing back into the cabin until the door closed behind her. The silence that followed was heavy with processed shock and vindication. Jennifer crouched beside Aria's seat. Sweetie, I am so sorry you had to experience that. Are you okay to continue the flight, or would you like us to arrange alternative travel? Aria looked at her phone at her father's text. Your choice, baby girl. I can have a car pick you up, or you can fly like you planned. What do you want? Aria wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and made a decision that would be quoted in articles about resilience for months afterward. I'm flying to Orlando, she said firmly. I'm going to see my sister and brother. I'm going to have fun on my vacation. And I'm not letting that mean lady take that away from me. Pride and heartbreak warred in Captain Rodriguez's expression. That's very brave. My daddy taught me to be brave, Aria said simply. And thousands of miles away, in his Atlanta office, Marcus Thompson listened to his daughter's words and felt tears stream down his face. As security escorted Catherine Whitmore through the terminal, she suddenly wrenched herself free from their grip, spinning back toward the gate with wild eyes. Her carefully maintained composure had shattered completely, replaced by the ugly desperation of someone watching their privilege evaporate in real time. This is wrong. Catherine's voice echoed through the terminal, drawing stares from travelers at neighboring gates. You're all acting like I committed some crime. I just wanted my seat. I'm the victim here. The gate supervisor, a patient woman named Teresa Martinez who'd seen her share of entitled passengers, stepped forward. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Security will escort you to collect your belongings, and then. I don't need to calm down. Catherine shrieked. I need someone to acknowledge that I'm being discriminated against. That little girl's father is using his power to destroy me because I dared to question whether she belonged in first class. A crowd had gathered now, travelers pulling out phones to record the meltdown, recognizing they were witnessing something that would be viral within hours. Catherine's face was flushed, her designer suit rumpled, her mask of civility completely gone. You questioned more than that, a voice called out. One of the passengers from Flight 892, the black man who defended Aria, had followed them off the plane. You tried to physically take a child's seat. You refused to accept you were wrong, even when shown proof. You made racist comments about who deserves luxury. I never said anything racist. Catherine whirled on him, finger jabbing. You people always play the race card when you don't get your way. This had nothing to do with race. It was about a seating error. There was no error, Teresa said firmly. The child had seat 1A. You had seat 3C. You tried to displace her based on your assumption that she didn't belong there. Catherine pulled out her phone with shaking hands, her desperation morphing into vindictive determination. I'm posting this. Everyone needs to see how Delta treats loyal customers. How they throw away 15 years of business to protect some CEO's spoiled daughter. She started typing frantically, her fingers flying across the screen. Teresa nodded to security, who moved to confiscate the phone, but Catherine clutched it to her chest. You can't take my property. I have rights. I'm documenting this abuse. Ma'am, you're on Delta property, and you've been removed from the aircraft for cause, Teresa explained. You're not authorized to record or post about. I don't care about your authorizations. Catherine's voice reached a pitch that made people wince. The world is going to see this. They're going to see how a black CEO abuses his power to humiliate white passengers who dare to question his precious daughter. The racist subtext she'd been dancing around was now explicit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even travelers who'd been sympathetic to the idea of passenger rights turned away in disgust. Back on Flight 892, Aria sat in her reclaimed seat 1A, her phone pressed to her ear as her father talked her through breathing exercises to calm her racing heart. Around her, passengers who'd witnessed the confrontation approached one by one. "You were so brave," an elderly white woman said, tears in her eyes. "My granddaughter is about your age. If someone treated her that way, I'd want her to stand up for herself just like you did." "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," a young white man admitted. "I was recording, but I should have said something. I should have defended you." "We all should have," another passenger added. "We let that woman terrorize a child for 20 minutes before anyone intervened. That's on us." The collective shame in the cabin was palpable. People recognizing they'd been bystanders to cruelty, that their silence had prolonged Aria's suffering, that recording injustice wasn't the same as stopping it. "Dad, people are apologizing to me," Aria said into her phone, confusion in her voice. "Like, a lot of people. They're saying they should have helped sooner." "That's good, baby," Marcus said, though his voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "They're learning. But you shouldn't have needed a plane load of people to speak up. You should have been protected from the start." Jennifer approached with a complimentary meal voucher, juice, and what looked like genuine remorse. "Aria, I owe you an apology too. When I first came over, I assumed you were the problem before I even checked the facts. I let that woman's confidence and your age make me doubt you. That was wrong. I'm so sorry." Aria took the offerings, still processing everything that had happened. "You believed me when you saw the boarding passes. That's what matters." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "What matters is that I should have believed you from the start. A child tells me they have a ticket, and I should verify that before assuming anything. I let implicit bias guide my response, and you paid the price for it." In the terminal, Catherine had finally been separated from her phone by security. She'd managed to post her rant to Facebook before they'd taken it, and already the post was being screenshot and shared, but not in the way she'd hoped. Her attempt to paint herself as a victim was being radioed into oblivion. Comments flooded in from people who'd seen the cabin videos, who'd heard witness accounts, who recognized her behavior for what it was. "This woman tried to steal a child's seat and is calling it discrimination when she got caught. The audacity of white tears. She terrorized an 11-year-old and thinks she's the victim. Catherine Whitmore is exactly why black kids can't have nice things in peace." Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one another nail in the coffin of her reputation. Her employer, a luxury real estate firm, had already seen the videos. Her conference organizers had seen them. Her friends had seen them. And by the time Flight 892 finally took off for Orlando, 90 minutes late but finally moving, Catherine Whitmore's life had imploded so completely that she'd never work in luxury real estate again. But the question remained, would she learn from this, or would she simply become more bitter, more convinced that she was the real victim of a world that had finally held her accountable? Have you ever watched someone destroy themselves in real time rather than admit they were wrong? Catherine could have taken her actual seat and flown to Orlando with nothing more than mild embarrassment. Instead, she chose to escalate, to terrorize a child, to play victim when caught. Why do you think people double down on cruelty rather than accept fault? Is it ego? Fear? Or something deeper about how privilege works? Flight 892 touched down in Orlando 2 hours late, but Aria barely noticed. She'd spent the flight talking to her father, to the kind passengers who'd apologized, to her sister Maya, who'd been following everything on social media from the airport. "Little sis, you're trending," Maya had texted. "Catherine Whitmore is getting destroyed online. But more importantly, are you okay?" That was the question Marcus Thompson kept asking, too. Not about Catherine's consequences, not about the viral videos, but about his daughter's emotional state after being targeted and humiliated. "I'm okay, Daddy," Aria said as the plane taxied to the gate. "I was really scared at first. But then you called, and the captain came, and everyone started saying I was right. So I'm okay now." But Marcus heard what she didn't say, the slight tremor in her voice that meant she'd carry this experience with her, that some innocence had been lost today that he couldn't give back. When Aria walked into the arrivals area, Maya and Jordan were waiting with a huge sign that read, "World's Bravest Little Sister," decorated with purple hearts. They swept her into a group hug that lasted a full minute, both of them holding her like they could shield her from everything that had happened. "Dad called us," Jordan said, his 17-year-old voice thick with emotion. "Told us what happened. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself." "And so mad at that woman," Maya added fiercely. "Who tries to take a seat from an 11-year-old? What kind of person does that?" Meanwhile, Catherine Whitmore sat in the airport security office, watching her life unravel on her confiscated phone. Her employer had emailed, "Your conduct reflects poorly on our company. Consider this your termination, effective immediately." Her conference had revoked her registration. 3 friends had texted to say they couldn't be associated with her anymore. But worst of all was the message from her own daughter, a college student who'd seen the videos. "Mom, I can't believe you did that to a child. We need to talk about your behavior, because this isn't the first time you've acted like this. I'm embarrassed and ashamed." Teresa Martinez appeared in the doorway with the airport police. "Ms. Whitmore, Delta Airlines has filed a formal complaint about your behavior. You'll need to speak with these officers before you're allowed to leave." "This is insane," Catherine whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. "All this over a seat." "It was never about a seat," Teresa said quietly. "It was about you seeing a black child in a space you thought belonged to white people and deciding to remove her. It was about entitlement, prejudice, and your complete lack of empathy for a scared 11-year-old girl. And now you're facing consequences that match the severity of what you did." Catherine's phone buzzed one more time. A text from her lawyer. "After reviewing the videos, I can't represent you in any action against Delta. What you did is indefensible. I recommend you issue a public apology and hope it limits the damage." But even as Catherine sat in that office, watching her world burn, Aria Thompson was laughing with her siblings, posting a selfie with them captioned, "Made it to Orlando. Ready for the best week ever with my favorite people." The contrast was stark and deliberate. Aria refuses to let Catherine's racism steal her joy. Choosing to move forward, to reclaim her vacation, to be 11 years old and happy despite what she'd endured. That was the real victory. Not Catherine's downfall, but Aria's resilience. Though Marcus Thompson, watching his daughter's Instagram post from his office, knew the fight wasn't over. Catherine was done, but the system that had made her confident enough to target a child needed dismantling. And he was just getting started. Within 48 hours of Flight 892, Catherine Whitmore's face had become synonymous with entitled racism. The cabin videos had been viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. Major news outlets had picked up the story. Think pieces about racial profiling in luxury spaces flooded social media. But the consequences went far beyond viral infamy. Catherine's luxury real estate firm, Whitmore Properties, issued a statement that went nuclear. "We are appalled by Catherine Whitmore's behavior toward a child. Her actions violate every value our company stands for." Effective immediately, Ms. Whitmore is no longer employed by or associated with Whitmore Properties. We are conducting a full review of her past client interactions to ensure no one else experienced similar treatment. The conference she'd been flying to attend revoked her credentials and refunded her registration with a terse email. "Your behavior is incompatible with our commitment to diversity and inclusion." Her platinum medallion status with Delta was permanently revoked. Every major airline quietly added her to its no-fly watch lists. She'd been effectively banned from commercial aviation. Most devastatingly, her own family began distancing itself. Her daughter's Instagram post went viral. "That woman trying to steal a child's seat is my mother. I'm writing to say I don't condone her actions. I've watched her display casual racism my whole life, and I'm done making excuses for it. To Aria Thompson, I'm sorry. You deserved so much better." And to everyone else, being related to someone doesn't mean supporting their hatred. The post had 12 million likes and made Catherine's daughter, Emma Whitmore, a symbol of generational change and refusing to protect family members' bigotry. Catherine tried to salvage her reputation with a carefully worded apology posted to her now public Facebook page. "I sincerely apologize for my behavior on Flight 892. I was stressed, jet-lagged, and made poor decisions in the heat of the moment. I should have handled the situation with more grace. I hope Aria Thompson and her family can forgive me. The apology was rationed within an hour, with thousands of comments pointing out what was missing. You didn't apologize for trying to take a child's seat. You apologized for poor decisions. Heat of the moment? You harassed that girl for 20 minutes. That's not a moment. Notice she never says the words, "I was wrong," or acknowledges the racism. This isn't an apology. It's damage control. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson held a press conference that would reshape how airlines handle discrimination complaints. "What happened to my daughter happens every day to black passengers," Marcus told assembled reporters. "We're questioned about whether our tickets are real. We're asked to move seats for white passengers' comfort. We're treated as if our presence in premium spaces is inherently suspicious. Catherine Whitmore isn't the disease, she's a symptom." He announced sweeping changes, mandatory implicit bias training for all Delta employees, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, body cameras for crew members during confrontations, and a publicly accessible database showing how discrimination complaints were resolved. "My daughter got justice because I'm the CEO," Marcus continued, his voice heavy. "But what about the thousands of black children who experience this without powerful parents? They deserve protection too. So we're implementing the Aria Thompson Passenger Protection Initiative. Every child, every passenger, regardless of their parents' position, will be treated with dignity." Within days, United, American, and Southwest announced similar programs. The FAA opened an industry-wide investigation into racial profiling practices. Congress scheduled hearings. What had started with one entitled woman trying to take one child's seat had become a national reckoning with how commercial aviation treated passengers of color. But the most powerful moment came when Aria appeared on Good Morning America with her father. "What would you say to Catherine Whitmore if she were here?" the anchor asked gently. Aria thought carefully, her 11-year-old wisdom stunning the audience. "I'd say that I forgive her for being mean to me. But I won't forget. And I hope she learns that black kids deserve respect just like everyone else. We're not taking things we don't deserve. We belong in first class. We belong everywhere." The clip went viral with 25 million views in 24 hours. Aria's grace, her maturity, her refusal to let bitterness consume her, became a teaching moment in schools across America. Catherine watched that interview from her sister's house, where she'd fled after her own apartment became surrounded by reporters. She saw the child she'd tried to diminish speak with more dignity than she'd shown in 60 years of life. And for the first time, a crack appeared in her defensive wall. Not full remorse yet, but the beginning of understanding that she'd destroyed her own life by clinging to prejudice. Whether that crack would widen into genuine change or seal back up into bitterness remained to be seen. But Aria Thompson had already won. Not by destroying Catherine, but by refusing to let Catherine's racism define her. By going to Orlando, riding roller coasters with her siblings, and posting joyful vacation photos that showed the world she was more than a victim. She was a child who'd stood up to injustice and won. And that victory mattered more than any consequence Catherine faced. Have you ever wondered if viral justice actually changes hearts? Or if it just makes bigots more careful about getting caught? Catherine lost everything, but did she learn anything? And more importantly, did the millions who watched the story take away a lesson about standing up for others? Or just enjoy watching someone get what they deserved? What do you think changes more? Public shaming or personal reflection? 3 months after Flight 892, Aria Thompson sat in her father's home office in their Atlanta mansion, working on a school project about civil rights. Her assignment was to write about a personal experience with discrimination and what it taught her. She'd been staring at the blank document for 20 minutes. "Writer's block?" Marcus asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the way he used to make them when Aria was little and needed comfort after a bad day. "I don't know how to write about it without sounding like I'm bragging," Aria admitted. "Like, I experienced racism, but my CEO dad saved me, so everything worked out." That's not the point, is it? Marcus sat beside his daughter, setting down the mugs. "What do you think the point is?" Aria was quiet for a long moment, gathering thoughts that had been forming over the last 3 months of therapy sessions, family conversations, and processing what had happened to her. "I think the point is that I got justice because you have power," she said slowly. "But most black kids who go through what I went through don't have a dad who can ground planes. They file complaints that go nowhere. They accept being treated badly because fighting back seems impossible. And that's not fair." Pride and heartbreak warred on Marcus's face. "You're right. It's not fair. What happened to you was wrong, but the fact that you got consequences only because of who I am, that's another layer of wrong." "So how do we fix it?" Aria asked, her 11-year-old eyes holding a seriousness that no child should need. "How do we make it so the next black girl who gets her seat stolen gets justice even if her dad isn't a CEO?" "That's what the Passenger Protection Initiative is trying to do," Marcus explained. "Creating systems where power doesn't matter. Where every complaint gets investigated. Where discrimination has consequences regardless of who the victim is." "But Dad, systems are run by people. And people have biases." Aria pulled up something on her laptop, showing her father a news article. This came out yesterday. A black family was removed from a United flight for suspicious behavior. They were just speaking Swahili. The Passenger Protection Initiative didn't help them. Marcus read the article, his jaw tightening. "You're right. The initiative isn't enough. Policy changes aren't enough. We need cultural change. We need people to see black passengers as humans deserving dignity, not threats to be managed." "How do you change culture?" Aria asked. "Stories," Marcus said simply. "Your story changed culture. Millions of people watched Catherine Whitmore try to take your seat, and they had to confront their own biases. Had to ask themselves if they'd ever made similar assumptions about who belongs in first class. Had to recognize that racism isn't just slurs and violence. It's also entitlement and assumptions and believing some people deserve luxury less than others." Aria thought about that, about the thousands of messages she'd received from black kids who'd experienced similar situations. Kids told they were too loud on planes. Too smelly. Too suspicious. Too much. All coded ways of saying too black for this space. "I got a letter last week," Aria said quietly. "From a girl in Chicago. She's 12. And she said a woman tried to take her first-class seat too, but when she stood up for herself, the flight attendant believed her immediately. She said it's because they'd all seen my story and didn't want to be the next Catherine Whitmore." "That matters," Marcus said, pulling his daughter close. "That's one girl who didn't experience what you experienced because you spoke up about it." "But it shouldn't have happened to me in the first place," Aria's voice cracked. "I keep thinking about that. About how I was just excited to see Maya and Jordan. I had my playlist ready and my new book, and I was going to get a fancy airplane meal. And then that lady looked at me and decided I didn't belong there, and everything changed." Marcus held her as she cried. These tears were different from the ones on the plane, deeper and more complicated, the kind that came from processing trauma rather than experiencing it. "I hate that this happened to you," Marcus said, his own voice thick. "I hate that at 11 years old, you understand racism in ways you shouldn't have to. I hate that I couldn't protect you from this." "But you did protect me," Aria said, pulling back to look at him. "Maybe not from it happening, but from it not mattering. You made sure Catherine faced consequences. You made sure that other kids might be protected. You turned my bad experience into something that could help people." "You turned it into something that could help people," Marcus corrected. "By being brave. By standing your ground. By refusing to let her take what was yours. You were 11 years old, facing down an adult, and you didn't back down. That's not me, baby girl. That's all you." They sat together in comfortable silence, processing, healing, understanding that justice and trauma could coexist, that winning didn't mean you weren't wounded. "I'm going to write about it," Aria said finally, turning back to her computer. "But I'm not going to write it like a victory story. I'm going to write it like a lesson. About how racism still exists even in 2025. About how it hides behind polite language and assumptions. About how we all have to stand up to it, not just when it's our own seats being stolen." She started typing, and Marcus watched his daughter transform her pain into purpose, her trauma into teaching, her victimhood into advocacy. The essay she eventually submitted was titled, "The Seat That Taught Me About Power and Privilege." It won first place in her school's writing competition and was later published in a national education journal. But more than any award, what mattered to Aria were the letters she received from other Black children who'd read her words and felt less alone. Children who'd experienced similar racism and hadn't known how to name it, how to fight it, how to survive it without letting it make them bitter. "Thank you for showing me that my voice matters," one letter read. "Thank you for proving that standing up to racism is worth it even when it's scary." That was the real legacy of Flight 892. Not Catherine Whitmore's downfall, but Aria Thompson's rise. A child who'd been targeted, who'd stood firm, who'd turned her suffering into a shield for others. And in doing so, she'd proven something her father had always believed, that change doesn't come from one powerful person making one big decision. It comes from ordinary people, even 11-year-old girls, deciding they deserve dignity and refusing to accept anything less. Catherine Whitmore had tried to take Aria's seat because she thought Black children didn't belong in first class. Instead, Aria had taken her voice and used it to ensure Black children would always know they belonged everywhere. That was justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but real and growing and unstoppable. One brave child at a time. 1 year after Flight 892, Aria Thompson boarded another Delta flight to Orlando, same route, same airline, even requesting seat 1A deliberately. Her father had offered to upgrade the entire family to a private jet, but Aria had refused. "I'm not letting what happened make me afraid to fly commercial," she told him. That would mean Catherine Whitmore won. This time, when Aria settled into seat 1A, the flight attendants knew her name, treated her with genuine warmth, and made sure she had everything she needed. This time, no one questioned her belonging. This time, she flew without incident, reading her book, texting her siblings, being 11, turning 12, and carefree in ways she'd earned back through therapy and time. But she'd never forget. And she'd never stop using her voice. Aria had become a youth advocate, speaking at schools about standing up to discrimination, about knowing your rights, about refusing to shrink when people tried to make you small. She'd helped implement student-led bias reporting systems in 3 school districts. She'd testified to the FAA about child passenger protections. And she'd shown thousands of Black children that their voices mattered, that speaking up could create change, that even kids had power when they refused to accept injustice. Catherine Whitmore, meanwhile, had disappeared from public life entirely. Her apology had been hollow, her reputation destroyed, her career over. Whether she'd learned anything or just grown bitter in her isolation remained unknown. But Aria had learned something profound, that her trauma didn't have to define her, that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible, and that one person standing firm could shift entire systems. As her plane touched down in Orlando, Aria looked out the window at the city where her story had begun and smiled. She'd turned her worst day into her most powerful lesson. She'd transformed her tears into testimony. She'd refused to let racism steal her joy. And that was the ultimate victory. Now it's your turn to reflect honestly. Do you think racial discrimination and prejudice can truly end, or will they always adapt to new forms, finding new ways to exclude and diminish people of color? What do you believe needs to happen in airlines, stores, schools, workplaces, everywhere, to curb this poison that's infected our society for generations? Do you think serving justice to individual racists like Catherine Whitmore is enough? Or does the entire system need dismantling and rebuilding from the foundation up? More importantly, what would you have done in Aria's position? Would you have had the courage to stand your ground against an adult trying to take what was yours? And as a passenger on that flight, would you have been one of the silent majority recording but not intervening, or would you have spoken up for that child before the CEO's power arrived? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about times you've witnessed Black people questioned about whether they really belong in premium spaces, luxury stores, first-class cabins, or anywhere that privilege has historically been gatekept. What did you do? What do you wish you'd done differently? If you want racism to become a thing of the past in our country and world at large, if you want to be like Aria Thompson, using your voice to educate, to advocate, to refuse silence in the face of injustice, Then share this video with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can amplify these stories. Together, we can create accountability where silence once protected oppressors. Together, we can build a world where 11-year-old girls can sit in their assigned seats without having to prove they deserve to be there, without needing CEO fathers to get basic human dignity. Hit that like button if you stand for equality and justice. Drop your experiences and opinions in the comments because this conversation doesn't end with Aria's story, it continues with yours. And subscribe to stay connected to more stories that expose injustice and inspire action. Thank you for watching Aria Thompson's journey from victim to advocate. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. And thank you for being part of the solution, because change starts with people like you deciding that seat stealing, space policing racism is unacceptable, and proving it with your actions every single day. The fight isn't over. Catherine Whitmore is gone, but the mindset that created her still exists in countless others. But we're winning, one story at a time, one protected child at a time, one person who chooses courage over silence at a time. See you in the next story. And remember, when you see someone being told they don't belong somewhere, don't just record it. Stop it. Speak up. Intervene. Because your voice, yes, yours, has more power than you know. Use it. Together, we're not just witnessing change. We're creating it.